resident, business owner, or just a neighbor that cares?
My name is Elisa, and I'm a resident. I live on the Anderson Place, and I guess if you're having a development down the street from us, it's very kind. Oh, Elise.
I'm Allison Young. I'm a Madisonville resident, and I saw the post on Instagram and thought I would come.
Awesome. Thank you for coming.
My name is Ann Holden. I live in Madisonville for 20 years. As a really. Hi, everybody. I'm a resident of Madisonville.
Thank you for coming.
I'm Steve Seifert, resident of Madisonville. I'm Brian Gary, I'm the director of neighborhood science.
Nice to see you, Brian.
Mike Callahan, owner of property in Madisonville and also lifetime resident of 26 years. Lived here 65 years.
Thank you for coming.
Sanford Poole, a resident here in Madisonville. Retired. And we're your residents.
All right. Hello, welcome. If you want to come and take a seat, we do have a sign-in sheet we'll get to you. And so if anybody wants a drink or snacks, I'm on a diet, so like I can't take any of this home. I did buy it, MCC didn't. So if you don't want to eat it now, feel free to get up throughout this. And if you don't eat any and there's stuff left, please take it home with you because I have to not take it to my house. I lack self-control. Hi, Angela.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. I tried to call you yesterday to remind you about this in your voicemail.
Well, I got somebody outside of Madisonville already sent me the flyer. I
Okay.
don't live in Madisonville. So I got other people keep an eye on Madisonville.
Oh, yeah, I was on the email. All right. Well, just to introduce us. Hey, Karen. Oh, we still need these folks. Sorry, Miss Tony. Do you want to?
Oh, I didn't know it was me yet. I thought it was a young man right there.
We hit everybody behind. Yeah, we don't stand.
How you doing? This is special meeting.
My name is. Just a minute if you want. I don't know what name to give you. That's fun.
Is this something MCRA can give? This something the council give?
I know it's Bush County. I run the Madisonville. But my name is Rosemary Tank.
This something the council give or something the community? Then got to do the acronym.
Terry.
Oh.
Same old stuff, huh?
I'm Terry, TA squared. I'm a Madisonville resident. Had family live here all my life. And I'm also the president of the business chamber.
What? We're just saying our name, resident.
Oh, Angie Pearson. I've been here all my life.
Timing.
Since you're walking up, I am alive. Can you tell everybody who you are and how long you've lived here?
Just me and my whole family.
Your whole family.
Monica Hill, my grandparents have lived here over 63 years. And I lived here 37.
Awesome.
No, 36. Okay.
I like the legacy families. That's good.
And I'm Carrie Devery. I'm president of the community council as of January of last year. And what year is it? So 4-year resident of Madisonville.
All right. And Kate took off. She'll come back. She had the cream sweater on. She was running around. She's going to help. Carrie's going to be helping too. So this isn't just like a lead thing. And we are going to interact. We're going to start out this meeting. It's going to be a little different. Yes, Miss Angela?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sometimes I get my assumptions get me in trouble. But I thought that this meeting company here to expound and explicate to us what's actually going on in this community, other than my community where I'm not really much anything, my meetings. So that's what I thought this was gonna be about. So this is y'all regular.
This is the house committee meeting. We haven't had one of these in a while because we've had so many developers coming in. We can have developers come in the future if we get to a point where it's necessary. Part of what this is at every meeting, we have folks, everybody has different information about developments, right? And about housing, and we all have opinions, as you should, because it's your community. So the point of this, I go over the first 20 minutes is going to be information. We'll hold questions to the end, because we're just gonna go over some like common misconceptions. I'm gonna kind of work on getting some facts to you, because you can't make an informed decision and you can't be an empowered citizenry and advocate for yourself if people are giving you different kinds of information that's incorrect. So we're just gonna go over some really basic things, because my goal is, I don't need to do your work for you. As residents of Madisonville, you're all smart, thoughtful, caring people who love your neighborhood. So our goal is to empower you so you can come together and start making some decisions as a community council. And you're not having to worry about spending so much time arguing. Because I feel like that's what's happening in a lot of our meetings. And that's what we talked about in January, right? The general consensus of the MCC meeting was, we have like factions of people. And because that's always divided, it's hard for us to come to a general consensus. So hopefully the plan is we're gonna go over some common misconceptions. We're gonna talk about some facts. Then after all that, so if you have questions during it, please write them down, because I want to hear your questions. But I just know that we all get excited and sometimes we start talking and we kind of get into it, which I totally let happen, but I want to get through this stuff first. Then we can discuss, answer questions, and hopefully, if all goes well, and I'm going to try to keep time, the last like 45 minutes, I really want you all sitting down and talking about the issues that you're seeing in the community with housing, whether it's more affordability, you're concerned about density, you don't understand what accessory dwelling units are. These are all things that are kind of getting tossed at you by city council, or you're hearing about it in the paper. So what we can do is, at the end of this meeting, any of you who want to come back, and if every single one of you wants to come back to housing community, I encourage you to, and bring a friend. This group can become a very, very powerful group through the community, and kind of with the like voice of MCC behind it, and kind of make recommendations to the body as a whole. My goal is we leave here with goals for the rest of the year for the committee and some action steps that I will work hard to help you do in my free time, as long as we can come to a general consensus, because that's the point. We've got to start moving forward kind of together. We have folks that are not heard always. They are listened to. People like listen to the words coming out of their mouth, and then we disregard it because we think we know more. And that's what this committee is. This committee is about us working together. Everybody should be at 80% happiness, right, at the end. So that's kind of what the plan is. Now, if you don't like this, this is a housing committee meeting. The point of committees is not to talk about one specific thing that's upset us, or to argue over, I don't like the color of that building. I don't like how that building has a parking lot. This is supposed to be about us identifying overall issues and then us finding ways to solve these issues as a community, ways to advocate for the city to put forth money and effort and policy. So I'm going to ask that if you're staying here today, please take that into consideration, because I want us to all be thoughtful of each other's time. We are not going to disregard anyone, and we are not going to put somebody down because they do not like something that we have supported. And we're not going to put somebody down because they did something that we don't appreciate. With that being said, there's always room for healthy discord. So or discourse. So, we promote that. Yes, Brian?
Are you the chair?
Yes, yes. Oh, I didn't myself. So I'm Alicia. Call me Eve, call me Lish, call me Alicia. That's not my name, but I'll answer to it. I do not live in Madisonville. I would love to. I fell in love with this community. I would have to, because nobody else would volunteer this much time where they don't live unless they cared. I can't afford a house here. I actually looked, and I can't. So that's sad, and that is not good. I am not on the low end of the scale with finances personally, so I should be able to afford something I can't. Yes, Tate?
I have a housekeeping request.
Yes.
Can you take like 2 minutes and move these 2 tables back so I can speak that, and then the people in the middle that want to write stuff down?
Can we do this? Yes. You don't mind? Just 2 minutes? And then we're going to move through this, and Carrie and Kate are going to help me with the presentation. Also, heads up, everybody, we do have the hot camera here. We borrowed it. Who was like, Oakley.
Please.
Oakley was nice enough to let us borrow this. This means we can record this. We can put it on our YouTube channel. So if you have an issue with that, let me know. But the point is that we want to be able to show people that we're working hard here. Neighborhoods working hard together and listening to each other gets the attention of the city. Yes.
Would you be able to share some of your background and experience in the law?
So I worked for 8.5, almost 9 years for the state of Kentucky at the area development district, it's a regional development district. I've been a highway safety.
Do we need this
planner.
right now?
I've been a development
I don't know
planner,
what this is.
community development planner, I've worked in homeland security planning, also local government specialist. I served as a city manager for 6 years. And then I was also working at Imperk for 2 years through the pandemic, so that was an awesome experience, which is when I got to meet most of you and kind of fell in love with the community. And then when I'm back working in the state, specifically working on large scale tech projects. So, and I've worked also as a consultant, financial tracking, and assisting developers with environmental review, which is kind of the administrative side. So when I talk about certain things like the financing of affordable housing projects, I'm knee deep in it, folks, every single day. I'm going to talk to you about brownfields. I managed the Northern Brownfields program for 4 years and built it. So that was, and not by myself. In fact, I'm getting to work with my former boss who was retired. He came back to help grow it. And he and I did this together. And I think he brought in like 3 million. It's an amazing program. Yeah, brownfields like being cleaned up left and right. So that's kind of my background. If you with a mishmash, people have a hard time saying no. Whenever a contract would come through and they'd be like, hey, nobody wants to do this. Can anybody volunteer? Be like, I'll do it. I'll crash course for 6 weeks to learn how to do this. So it's been a good experience. I've had a full career. And I get to give back to folks because people gave it to me and my family. I grew up really poor. So I was ready to give back to my whole career in public service. And if you have questions about me, feel free to email me housing@ourmadisonville.com. I'm going to try to make myself more available. I'm going to admit I have been bad about responding to emails for a couple months. I've just been under duress at work and it has taken a toll on me and I kind of overwhelmed myself and that's my fault. So I promise you, if you're reaching out, I'm going to try to like keep up and communicate more. Okay. All right, let's jump into this. So I kind of feel like this whenever we start talking about housing. That is a dinosaur riding on a, what are those, Segway?
Yeah.
Wearing a top hat. He has no idea what's going on. And when we start talking about housing, that's how I feel because it's kind of like the chicken or the egg, which comes first, right? I always say, like, so does housing development begin with the developer, the bank, the need from the community, the vacant or blight property? It can come from all of those. And there's no right way to say like it starts here. And then if you're feeling like that's confusing, you're not alone because the experts are constantly tweaking and learning how to fix this. Right now, we're fixing problems that were created like in the 90s, right? Cincinnati like did a bunch of stuff in the 90s, so we've been trying to fix it. We're making a lot of mistakes now too because that's the nature of it. And we're going to be fixing that in years to come. The key is that we stay vigilant and we try to work together to find out what's happening, who's not receiving what they need, and how we can make that better and make it equitable across the board for all of us. All right, next slide. Okay, so housing development isn't in any one place. It's kind of what we were talking about. It really takes all these parts moving to come to fruition. So like, you can't just be like, I would like to do a project here and I'm going to buy property that magically appeared exactly where I wanted it. And somehow the bank is going to have the financing I need at the exact moment. That things don't work out that way. It is a constant balancing act between developers, your city administration, your local organizations. You have MPERC, which is a community development corporation. You've got MCC, which is your community council. You've got the business chamber, the MBC. All these organizations are kind of advocating for you. With that being said, though, we have a bunch of different voices. The one place housing development rarely begins is with the community, which is kind of sad. How many of you feel it should start with the community and what the community wants? So, yeah, it used to, okay.
there's a really cool book, if any of you haven't read it, it's old, but it's called Implementation. And it's basically like how to not do a project, and it's the failure of Oakland in California. And it's sad because everything that happens in that book, and this is like if you are an urban planning, community planning, public administration, any of those programs, you study this book because it's everything you don't do. And sadly, we're doing like half of it. And this is in Cincinnati. This is Northern Kentucky. This is the region. So it's not isolated, and everybody is trying to do better, I think. All right, people aren't mad about what they got. They're mad about what they didn't get, mad at what was taken away that was promised to stay. So I had an employee at a job, and she looked at me and she was younger. And she goes, well, I don't understand. We were working with a community that had a lot of change. And she goes, I don't understand why they're mad, because I'm looking at their comprehensive plan. And everything written on the document is what they got. So the document was not prepared by community members. Community members did not sign off on it. Community members showed up. Problem is, participatory engagement has just kind of started to really take hold, right? I don't want to talk at you, and I am talking at you right now, but here soon, we're going to get past this, and I want you all kind of driving this shit, okay? So we have participatory engagement now. We didn't before. So people would listen to you, and I'm going to pick on people I know. I'm sorry. I'll get to know everybody's names soon. Miss Tony. Miss Tony sat to the meeting, and she was like, I would like things, and I would like them to be very tall and on the right side of the street. And the person writing the comprehensive plan knows everything because they have degrees. And this is, I've been culprit of it in my past. I had to be humiliated and humbled and learn some tough lessons. But when they put that into writing, it becomes, they would like monochrome colors on the left side of the street. So you did get something you asked for, just not the way you wanted it. And they also tore out all the blue things you liked that were already there. And I say this like kind of a widget, it's just like a catch-all. The point is, this community, because of what's new. They are mad because of things they lost that they did not think they were going to lose. Or maybe they thought they were getting something, and if they were told, either not misled, but sometimes if you don't understand something, somebody like my position should be able to know, like when you're asking me a question, like I know what they're asking. I shouldn't mislead you by giving you the honest answer, but in such a way that you can't understand what I'm saying. That's like when I go to my doctor and my doctor's like, this is wrong with you. And I'm like, can you just like draw a picture? Because I'm not a doctor. I don't understand the words you're using. Yes, Mike?
Okay, you got take away what was promised. That is the problem.
Yes.
We got to make sure.
Mr. Ty, can we hold the, please, just, we want to get through this part, because we're getting into misconceptions, but please write it down, because I want to hear you talk. Okay, so can we go on to the next slide? I want to burn through this part. Yes, Ms. Tony?
We can go on to the next one too, probably. If you can explain what a variance means.
We're getting there. Yeah.
I'm just saying. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all the goodies. We want to cover it. Okay, so let's look at the entire process. Okay, so what can we do to ensure Madisonville retains all we find important and we receive what we truly need? So our goals for tonight, like I said, we want to learn about common misconceptions. We want to better understand what's happened, what's happening, and what you can do moving forward. My goal is that, here in a few months, you all feel comfortable moving forward to work towards plans and policies that protect your community and that keep everybody happy, because there's something here for everybody, right? I want you to learn about the development process tonight. That's what we're going to kind of go into right after this. Answer any remaining questions about the presentation, discuss where we are in Madisonville right now and how you want to move forward. And then my goal is for us to end this by creating some action steps and goals for the year. You can come up with policy ideas, advocacy ideas, thresholds you expect to hold developers to, site identification, how to be a better neighbor. Sometimes one of the best things you can do for housing is just learning to be a good neighbor. And I say that, and it sounds really simple, but there are some people that do not know to not call the code enforcement board because your neighbor is sick and hasn't mowed their lawn. You go mow their lawn for them or something. So like, just silly little things that we can do that can make a huge difference in our neighbors' lives and our lives. Next slide, please. Okay, common misconceptions. Oh yeah, like it's super easy to build affordable housing. Let's see, this says, oh, and it's fast too. Really easy. Average affordable housing project, you're looking at a minimum of 3 years from beginning to finish. It costs a ton, which is funny, like to build affordable, it costs more money. And the process you have to go through to obtain the housing subsidies that any developer is going to need. You apply for LIHTC, it goes in, you're looking at a 9-month review to answer period. Then you have to take that to your bank. The bank has to look, unless you're self-funded, which most developers aren't. You take that back to your bank. You might have to go to a private bank. We have Catalytic Fund in Covington, Kentucky. We have CDFI in Cincinnati. These are banks that work with big developers, and they work with different federal and state funding mechanisms to help develop or to help fund these developments. So it is not fast and it's not easy. So I will say, we all give developers a hard time, but when we get upset about the amount of time it takes time. And they want to make money. So they're going to work as fast as they can, even though it may seem like they're not. Oh yeah, so another misconception, you're in a floodplain, so go dig a pond, detention basin. Yeah, that's not exactly how that works. Ask the people on Virginia Avenue over in by, I guess, north side, like right down from it. There were 12 houses that were flooded. I was down there the day it happened. They had to red tag everything in their home. Electric boxes, water heaters, their homes were 100% destroyed because 2 detention basins, one overflowed into the other, overflowed, and like a wall, 4-foot wall of water hit these houses, ripped off decks and everything else. So that's what happens. And that was with good engineering. It was just a fluke situation that wasn't anticipated. So that's not the answer to everything. You know, you cannot develop every floodplain. It's not always feasible. The same thing goes with brownfield sites. Like, oh, you know, like it's so dirty at that site where that factory used to be. We can't touch that. We're all going to turn into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's like my favorite analogy. That's not necessarily the case. There are plenty of things you can do depending on how you want to develop a site. But to develop it for housing with people living there, drinking the water coming from the pipes that are going through that dirt, that has to be cleaned up to a certain threshold. But also everybody thinks that you can have a concrete because everybody's heard about capping a site, and capping a site doesn't always work either. There's a lot more that goes into it. And if you ever want to talk about brownfields in depth and solutions for floodplains, we can like look at that for future meetings, and we can maybe get some other people to come in that have like very specific experience in those situations, and kind of give you guys some more information, because we have sites that are brownfields and are in floodplain here, right? So if you're going to argue for them to be developed, you need to know what you're dealing with, and you should have that information. There's no reason it not be given to you. The government willy-nilly hands out money to developers so they can ruin your lives. I mean, it probably feels that way sometimes. I think I've seen all of you at different times, you know, have moments where your lives have been impacted. I would hope that some of our developments are impacting your life for the better. I do think that most people are trying to do something. Every now and then you get a little rotten apple. But we're going to empower you so moving forward, that impact is good as we can get it for you, okay? And Mr. Poole, I see you and I know you're upset. We're going to try to give you, we can. Okay. Let's see, the government is going to displace you from your home or business. They better not. And if they do, you are entitled to displacement and relocation funds. That is a federal law. There are times where that has not been observed, like throughout the years. I can assure you, you are to be compensated, and there's a process. Do not feel like you don't have a fight, because I've seen too many people that have been displaced and they didn't know that they had some legs to stand on, right? I'm sure, and I'm seeing the faces when I said that, it's sad, and I've seen it happen, and it's not okay. I was in a meeting not too long ago and a colleague was like, oh, well, you could just use eminent domain. And I was like, we don't use that word. It's like, we just don't use that word. That is 100% last resort. And that should be something that once in my lifetime I have to deal with. That is, and nobody looks forward to it. Next slide. All right, so growing up, I wanted to be Robin Hood, and then my mom explained to me that you had to be rich to be Robin Hood, because Robin Hood was actually rich, and then he like tried to like steal from the rich to give the poor, and so I was like, so I can't be a fox that shoots a bow and arrows because I was born poor, much to my chagrin. And if any of you remember that cartoon, that was just an awesome cartoon. It's the Robin Hood as a fox, and I see you trying to look through the.
It's hard to read.
I'm sorry. And we can send this out to you. If you put your email addresses down, we can send out the slides. Okay, these are some common misconceptions, and you're gonna probably wanna like raise your hand, just wait, because we're gonna get to the answers and all of it, and then we can discuss at the end. You can stop a developer because they are building something you don't like. No. There are ways to hinder development if they are doing something wrong. We will talk about that. You cannot stop a developer just because you don't like it. That takes planning. The best way to stop a development you don't like is for it to never begin. And that takes some careful planning on a community's part. So we're going to learn about how to do that. The best place to hold up a development is in the permitting phase, planning and zoning hearings. Nope, that's like a Hail Mary. On occasion, somebody is asking for something, and we'll get to variances and all of that in just a minute, Ms. Tony. Somebody will be asking for something that has not been permissible in the past. You might have a leg to stand on to say, nope, the permitting is not going through the request for a variance or a zone change. Of 1 in 10 chance, and that's really pushing it. Probably not that much. All CBAs, developers have to listen to citizens who work together to create a CBA, and they have to meet all the requests made in the CBA. No, they don't. If it's a private development on private property paid for with private dollars, unfortunately, they don't. If they're not making huge asks, they don't. So once again, this is about you as a community learning how to proactively determine what's going to be happening in your community and what kind of developments you're going to see. But doing it this way, how we've had to do it, it's been very reactionary, because what else are you going to do? You all have been impressive. This community is impressive. People show up. I don't care what your side or thought is on the situation. You all show up. You express thoughtfully how you feel about it. Now we're going to teach you how to do it on the forefront, so you don't have to show up and feel defeated in the end. Okay. All CBAs have teeth. No, most couldn't chew pudding, because most don't. A CBA, a community benefits agreement, to have power, you have to have legs to stand on, which means you have to have some kind of subsidy from the city, from the government, from the state or federal government. You need to be asking for something conveyance of property to have any kind of power to have a CBA. You can't have a CBA for every project, because if I come up to Angela, if I come up to you tomorrow and say, I see you're building a deck on your house, and me and all the neighbors, we made a CBA because you are developing a deck. Are you gonna tell me to go take a hike? Because you probably should. That's why, we have this, I think, knee-jerk reaction. We want to have a CBA. You have to have a way to make it worth listening to, because if you don't, Kate, Carrie, if you want to chime in on this at all as we get into these things, but truthfully, if you try to have a CBA process with every developer, the city is going to quit listening to you, because at that point they think you're just trying to hinder development and not do specific positive things for your community. So we need to pick and choose when it's appropriate and what to put in it, to where you're happy, the developer's happy, and the city listens to you. That's kind of like, you don't want to tell your mom you're sick every single day to stay home, and then she finally makes you go to school and you throw up in front of everybody and you're just embarrassed all day. That's one of those things where we don't want to use that power, but it is a powerful tool at the right time. And that's where I was saying it's a good idea to have a CBA for every development. If you want to switch slides. So the development process. Okay, let's see. So capitalism. You might one day see a developer that's like, I'm cool to not make any money on this project to have affordable housing. I have yet to meet one. That kind of altruism just doesn't really exist in our society. I could be wrong, every now and then you see it. Most developments that are affordable or mixed affordability is included is because they have some kind of subsidy. And they are still making money because they still, even if they're a nonprofit organization developing, they still have to pay their employees. They have to pay their management staff. There has to be some money made. They also have to have money put away on the building. It's an investment. You don't want to we don't want to say, hey, this is mixed affordability and move people we love and care about, their neighbors, into homes or apartment units that are 60% AMI, knowing that in 10 years are going to be garbage because nobody's doing that up. So money has to be in our minds. We want to think, well, can't you just do this so people can pay this much money for rent? No, we have to find ways to make that feasible for a developer. Okay, and so this is kind of like where I make a joke. I'm like, can't they just meet us at this point? When they decide like, hey, there's a need to be met, or we can make some money. Cool, so you're gonna come to the community, right? This is like the time to come. Hello, just come on in. We'll pass the sign-in sheet to you. So if there's a need to be met, or developer sees a site and like, I can make some sweet money on that, you would think they would come to community council, right? Not really. I mean, they should, but we should do a lot of things. They don't. They go look at the site. They evaluate the site. They kind of determine what they need to do. So now that they've looked at the site, they kind of know what they're going to do. That's when they come to talk to us, right? No, it's not. Okay, so they looked at the site. Now they're going to draw up some fancy pictures. There's going to be some conceptual planning, initial renderings, and those renderings are going to make us all mad in the end because we all get these pictures, these conceptual renderings, and then project, which happens so often. I rarely see what we'll start with is what you get in development. And that's part of us not educating you all and asking you all to just randomly know information you shouldn't. The conceptual renderings are just that, it's a concept, it's an idea. And they're gonna come talk to us, right? And I'm like, for the love of butter, meet with us. And they generally don't at that point either, although we had one the other day that came and talked to us, which I'm sure you'll be hearing about soon. Permitting, so they go in for the permits. That is a whole process in itself, which we're gonna talk about, I think, in a slide or two later. And that's when we're mad. Because you're coming up here to our community council meeting. You've got all your engineering done. You're asking for permitting. You want us to do a zone change for you. You want to take these 3 parcels that we've held dear, the whole Jameson. People were upset because it was a farm. And at that point, they come to us and it's like, how dare you come to us this late? You're moving into. And the truth is, they didn't think about it. Is that okay? No, but is that reality? Yes, it is. Unfortunately. So once again, that's why you all need to come up with ways to make people come to the table to talk to you. I think most developers, if they can avoid having a community mad at them, they'd like that. You just got to find a way to make that happen. Okay, so they come talk to you, and then it comes to financing. They got to finance the project. Turns out it takes a lot of money to build huge buildings or houses. And let's see. This is where if they come to you at that point, you're probably pretty mad. I always tell people I don't wish any bad things on people. I just wish you walk on a sea of Legos barefoot forever. And that's kind of what happens. I'm sure all of you have dealt with a developer that you feel that way, that you want them to walk on a sea of Legos, or probably other things that are worse than here. Like, I'm sorry. All right, and then they start building, and that takes a long time. Turns out you cannot build a 5-story, 120 unit development in 6 months. I mean, you can, as long as you don't have any bad weather and there's no issues with the economy and prices don't go up and you don't have supply chain hold up. So these are things that affect the development process. You want to go on to the next slide? Okay, this is kind of the quick and the dirty of it. So there's 2 big impediments to affordable housing. I think that's the biggest reason most of us are here. You either want to make sure developments are going to be good for the community and are not negatively impacting you, or you're wanting to see affordable housing, or a mix of both. So cost to build, even with tax incentives and subsidies, it is still really difficult to build an affordable housing project, okay? There's actually Sarah Sheets is on the board at MCERC. She works at CDFI. She knows a lot about the financing. She's somebody that's a good resource in the community that you can ask about that. To get the financing you need to pay for a housing development. The federal government has no idea what it takes to survive with low to moderate income and has set absurd income limits. The federal government just ridiculous. I don't know what they're thinking, that people can live on this much. Like, I can't pay the rent on apartments that people who make like $30,000 less than me are supposed to pay. My mortgage is lower than 60% AMI for like most of this region. That is sad. Like, we have failed if we think people can pay that. I mean, I'm sure they could. You can afford 1/3 of your salary to pay rent if you have never had student loan debt. Have you ever gotten sick? How many of you been to the hospital? Raise your hand if you've been to the hospital ever, or had to go to the doctor for a big bill. Yeah. So if you've never had that, if your car's never broke down, and if somebody gave you a car, that probably helps too. You have chickens that lay your eggs, so you don't have to pay $400 for a dozen eggs right now. So if you don't have any of that stuff happening and absolutely nothing ever goes wrong and you don't do anything fun, you don't go out to eat, you don't watch movies, you don't put back into the economy at all, you can probably easily take 1/3 of your salary and pay for your rent, right? And that is sad because somewhere along the lines, our legislators have missed on what the average person is dealing with. And I don't know how that is because they seem like regular folks when we put them into office, right? But I think most of them want to. So that's where it's our job to become empowered and tell them what we need. At some point, they're gonna listen. All right, the difference between subsidy and tax incentive. So it's about a community council meetings. Many times I have heard folks saying, well, you're getting a tax subsidy. And it's like, no, don't. So a tax abatement is something the city has specific criteria for. And if you meet this criteria, you get a tax abatement. If they do not give abatement to a developer, a home builder, somebody who's rehabbing a home, and they have met all the criteria that X, Y, and Z have met, that's what we like to call a lawsuit waiting to happen. Because at some point, what's the purpose? Why are you telling me no? Because the community doesn't want you there. So that's kind of where you're looking at your incentives, your tax abatements. But when you look at subsidies, so yes, TIF is technically a tax abatement, but it's of like large magnitude and it requires bonding from the city to give you money ahead of time. So it's like future payments and getting to tap into your product. That you can have criteria for that is by the community and not just a standard of the city. This is where they have to meet certain requirements. When they want TIF, there's something called IRB, which is the industrial revenue bonds. That's another one. There are some, let's see, I think LIHTC has, which is the low income housing tax credit. I'm using acronyms, so if you don't know what I'm saying, write it down. I'll tell you, it's a bad habit. I apologize. That one has specific requirements. There's all these different subsidies that have here. I think most folks here in Madisonville are pretty cool. But if you have this notion in your head that like subsidies are bad, so you go to your library, it's subsidized, and so is your public school and your firehouse. So for people to have affordable housing, it's totally cool for them to have subsidies. That also means people are going to get paid. What you get upset about are landlords that have abused subsidies and abused the people that are living there. You are entitled to live in a clean and healthy place. Nobody should be living in less than awesome housing just because they have a voucher or there's some kind of subsidy involved. And yes, it is a subsidy. It's a subsidy to have 80% AMI housing. They're receiving a subsidy from the government. There's nothing wrong with that. So I don't think anybody in here has that thought in their head, but if you do, come talk to me so we can work on that one with you because I think it's a really bad misconception. Let's see. Well, what happens with floodplains and brownfields? Okay, so very quick because these have both been brought up recently with different projects. If you are in a floodplain, you cannot always develop. Sometimes the cost to do so, it's not necessarily, I mean, the cost to do it itself is going to be a lot. Like you have to do piering on some sites. You might have to do a detention basin. You might have your kind of drain systems, you might have to get MSD on board and look at like kind of your stormwater runoff and how that can affect neighbors. Because what's great is you start to fix this site that you want to develop, and unfortunately, the people that have been living here for 40 years on the street below you don't have homes in 6 months because they flood. That is not cool. We don't want to do that. We saw that on the landslide issue. You guys remember that on, was it 50 West that happened? Yeah, those people, like, homes were destroyed because of hillside development. That wasn't floodplain, that was hillside development. So like, slippage happened. We shouldn't be losing residents who've lived here, their homes and what they've invested in their livelihoods, because we built something where it didn't need to be built. But that's not even the real cost. The real cost with floodplains is flood insurance. So if you have a home or if you own a property that you're renting out that's in the floodplain, the cost for floodplain insurance on your home is astronomical. I don't know what the going rates are right now, and I can look that up for you if you're interested. But I know a couple of years ago, I was working in a community and there was a whole street that was in the floodplain. And I had people calling me that had just bought a house, and it was a young couple, and they'd both grown up in apartments and they worked really hard to buy their first home, and it was a fixer-upper. And they found out after kind of the fact, they thought that they paid for flood insurance once and it was like $9,000. No, that was what they had to pay every year. I don't have $9,000 to pay every year, and I doubt it you do either. We don't want to say, hey, let's build affordable houses in this floodplain and do all this stuff to mitigate it, and then take people that are struggling to have an investment and own a home, and then tell them they have to pay these astronomical flood insurance rates that they're required to have because of the mortgage and where they got their mortgage and their bank requirements. That's not helping people who are trying to get out of poverty. That's not helping people build generational wealth. That is depriving people of their hard-earned money. And that's us conning them. Like, if we do that to somebody, that is not cool. Brownfields, once again, there's a bunch of different ways. I have seen brownfield mitigation with, yes, pour some concrete on that sucker, make it a parking lot. But we don't want parking lots everywhere. We want homes, right? We're running out of space. That's why we have a density issue. So when it comes to homes on brownfields, first off, it is going to be a matter of how much does it cost to mitigate this site? So when I say mitigate, say you got a bunch of, we're just going to say funky stuff on this site, and to get rid of it, to make it a commercial site where people work 12 hours a day max, their exposure level, it's going to cost less to do that than people who live there 24/7 and have little kids that make mud pies in the backyard. Especially if you're like me. When I was a kid, I was like, mud pies, I'm going to totally eat a bite. Well, that's not good if it's contaminated site. So it takes a higher level, like a higher threshold of cleaning the site. Now, what can that mean? I have seen sites where they have been hauling away dirt for 20 years because every year the dirt, basically like there's gases kind of that come up and it contaminates the dirt, so they have to haul it away and bring it back. I believe in Louisville, Kentucky, the stadium is on a site kind of like that. It's been cleaned, it's safe to be there, but they have like constant monitoring, I think for 25 years they have to do on that site. I've seen sites where literally you go in and you dig out a foot of dirt, take it to an appropriate place to get rid of it, and guess what? Site's clean, they put down a little netting, plant some, I think it's sunflowers. There's certain plants you can plant around that suck up all the toxins out of the ground. Like, it's pretty cool. I also saw a housing development in Covington that I got to work on. It's called the Orchard Street development. Thank you. Orchard Street development, they had these shotgun houses, and they wanted to make them affordable homes for artists so they could, in the front of the house, have a studio, and behind it, you have your living quarters. And there was a brownfield site that was a nasty little junkyard. We made that the parking for them because there was no on-street parking. And, or well, there was limited on-street, and the on-street parking was for their clients and their patrons that came to buy their art. It was a really cool project. You can look that one up, Orchard Street project. Let's see. The process to receive state and federal subsidies is time consuming. I told you about that before. It's just a long process, and it's like so much paperwork that it's confounding. Displacement and takings, that is a rough one. This can happen, but sometimes it does. And when this happens, you all need to know how to handle that for yourselves and for your neighbors. That should be a last resort. Okay, let's go. Okay, so thresholds and precedent are kind of what guide first layer of permitting. So if somebody needs a variance, what's a variance? A variance is going to be specifically with form-based code where somebody wants to have something that varies from what the code dictates. So basically like the form-based code dictates a 15-foot setback in this transect zone and or in this transect, and we need a 5-foot setback. So they want a variance. Now, when does that become something that you can do something about? If somebody wants to do something that has no impact on health and safety, you're going to have a harder time proving that to a planning or a zoning or a code board. There's like 10 different names for them across the region. But if it's a safety issue because they want a 5-foot setback, walking to school, and we're going to have these people hanging out on our porches doing God knows what, we want that setback. Or like, what if a car wrecks? Have you ever seen the houses? Like we have here one house that just loves to get hit by cars. That's not funny. That's sad. You don't want to put somebody's home in a position where they're going to get hit by a car. So if they're asking, if a developer's like, we want to build these houses really close to the road, and you already know there's a traffic concern, well, that's probably a really valid argument to say, they need to have a bigger setback and they need to meet the standard, you know what I mean? So it's about safety and health. You can go here, there is a site, the city of Cincinnati has an amazing site, the staff's done a great job. They kind of walk you through the process. So I had somebody that was like, hey, can we talk about detention basins? And I was like, I think that, when water and sanitation, like look at all this stuff, they kind of give their input. The city's not willy-nilly making decisions like, we're going to give you this permit and we're going to just like, mess around and find out. That's not what's happening. They actually take it to the appropriate departments and the departments review everything. Let's see, when do you have a reasonable argument to request developer take action on requests during this phase? Okay, so if the request is out of the norm, so if it's something that's never been done before, that's probably a good time to make an argument. If what they're requesting is going to have a huge negative impact on the historic value of the designated historic zone, that's a really easy one. And when they're going to be setting a precedent, so when it's something new. Otherwise, if they're asking for a variance that they give to every person who asks for that variance, they can't not, because once again, they're being tasked with risk management for the city. They can't discriminate. So it's certain situations where you have that opportunity to really go and kind of like display your voice and let them know what you have concerns about to take into consideration. Okay. Let's see, community benefits agreements. Okay, so CBAs. It's just a contract. It's negotiated between a developer and a community-based organization representing residents' interests. And that organization, so technically speaking, you don't have to have a set organization. It's probably better that you do, so you can kind of get your foot in front of the developer or the city. The appropriate and beneficial way to approach a CBA, at which point, really upon initial conversations. If a developer comes in and they are taking TIF dollars, or they want an IRB, or they are wanting the community to look at like, there's like entertainment zones, there's community improvement taxes, there's different things that can be done, different kind of mechanisms. If they're wanting you to sacrifice any of your tax dollars, it's really easy to say, okay, at this point, you're gonna have to meet some needs for us. We want you to do X, Y, and Z for us. So that's a good point to have a CBA. What can we ask for? You can ask for anything, but you should be thoughtful and ask for reasonable and meaningful requests. I understand negotiation. So aim high, knowing you're going to kind of like come down in this like negotiation phase. Don't aim so high that the developer doesn't take you serious. And then you go to the city like, hey, don't give them money because they won't even talk to us. And the city's like, why would you ask for that? Make sure that you can be taken serious. It's fine to have wants. You need them. You do. I get it. But you also have to kind of like expect that if a developer doesn't have a reason to do anything for you, they're not going to. For it to really have teeth, which is kind of something I talk about down here, if there's conveyance of property, if they're going to receive property from the city, or from a organization that works with the city, Financial subsidy at the state or local level. And then obviously local tax subsidies, that's gonna be about it. Those are the times when you have that ability. Yes, Ms. Tony?
So when do you think CBA should go into effect? At the beginning of the project?
Well, they don't go into it, so when you work on them, it's really upon initial, like the minute that you realize you need to have one, you need to jump on it, don't wait. It also, if a project is phased, that's another time, like during phases, because it becomes like an evaluation process between phases, that's another time that you a lot of times see CBAs kind of come into effect. And then abuse of the CBA process and can result in the worst case scenario for a community. Like I said, I know people get excited and want to use it as a tool, but if you use it as a tool too much, it will backfire on you. You want to save this for when it can be meaningful and helpful for you. There are other things you can do moving on. Yes, Ms. Tony?
Can you give us an example of what you call the worst case scenario for the community?
Okay, so I mean, like the worst case scenario is they just don't listen to you. And nobody listens to you, like the city stops listening.
Right, like so when, so we, community councils send letter of support for projects. And so, yeah, you can get to the point where you can even publicly hear that at city council where they might, city council member might be talking about like, well, we don't need to worry about them. They're being, obstructionist or whatever. And so, yeah, because that's all like the power that you have is your voice. And if it's, what she's getting at is that, there have been a lot of instances in the past where the elected officials like just choose to basically ignore the feedback they're hearing from the community.
Okay, so when you have that kind of situation, is there a possibility of legal things you can step into to support what you're trying to do?
Oh, so, and we can talk more about that when we get to the questions at the end, if you don't mind, Ms. Tony, so we can I want to run through this, but there are some, the only way you could do something legally is if they're getting something from you. Because you can't hold people who have private money on private property to do certain things that are perfectly
I'm
legal.
not talking about that.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that in just a minute. So next slide. I think, okay, so this is it, and then we can get to the stuff where we're all engaging. Because I wanted us all just have some equal footing. What can we do? This, you need to engage, create policy, advocate for yourselves. You all have taken the first step. Neighborhood plan is going to be an excellent proactive source. Neighborhood planning process, this can be like the initial early stages, right? And then eventually you're going to have a person come in or a firm come in or the city staff, whomever is going to do it. They will guide you all. You will identify sites. You will identify what you want to see this neighborhood look like. Then you have legs to stand on. Because if a developer comes in and says, we're going to take this property right here, and we want to build Mercury apartments, 70 of them, and we're going to park on the street and take all your parking, and this upsets you. Actually, you'll notice in our neighborhood plan that we have a plan map change, and that's going to be recreational area. We're just waiting on the funds. A neighborhood plan is going to be the number one way to fight development that you don't like and to ensure appropriate development.
Comprehensive master plan is what you're talking about.
Well,
And that's
well,
what we need to do. So when these developers come in here, and they don't follow the master plan, if the community accepts, then we have a plan to stand on, we'll go downtown.
then the
We can
neighborhood
say, hey,
plan,
wait a minute, then you also can do a special overlay district.
yes.
There's another thing, there's a lot of things we can do as a community.
Oh,
Instead of laying down and letting these.
And that's what we're
developers
gonna talk about in just a minute. Have those conversations in small groups, but also, just so you know, Mr. Ty, the neighborhood plan is basically a comp plan at the neighborhood level. The comprehensive master plan is generally seen either at the city or county level. So the neighborhood plan, that's what that process is gonna be. It's gonna be a comprehensive plan for the neighborhood.
And we need to get that done before.
You guys are
before the
already,
Community is developed.
you got yourselves on the list. Hey, Carrie or Kate, do you guys know when that is?
So in the planning department's annual report in January, they did have Madisonville listed for having a neighborhood plan. So we requested that last year. And so we'll get the formal answer in May when the budget comes out in that request. But so that is confirmation that we're on the list for a future
Yes.
neighborhood plan. And I've asked them so there are specific guidelines that the city has to accept a plan. And what will happen is city council will actually vote to approve the plan, and then it'll be on the city's website. Like Mount Airy just got a neighborhood plan.
Does the city allow overlay districts, special overlay districts?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like there's currently an overlay district downtown to prevent parking lots to be built.
And Mr. Ty, if you can just, let's wrap this up because we are literally getting ready to move into this, and I don't want us to, because we're getting close on time. Okay, perfect, keep doing that. Identify what you want as a community. That's where this starts, what we're doing. We're gonna talk about what you want. You're gonna identify sites. Once you know what you want, you know where you'll want it. You guys come together as a group and you don't have 10 different factions all saying, well, that site should be this, because then nobody gets heard. Nothing gets done that anybody is gonna be happy with. That's where you start to advocate for yourselves. The city, the port, you can ask them to help obtain sites that you see. You know, Mr. Or Steve, you had the list of the properties you're concerned about. That list is the kind of thing you do to keep. That becomes like, hey, can we keep our eyes on this? And if any of these become available, or if we can take action, can we obtain these sites so we can secure them and make sure we know what's happening at these locations and on these properties? All I ask, be organized, be thoughtful, and become a community that developers want to come work with, because here's the thing. 80% of the time, 70% of the time, we're not going to say 90 or 100. I think you're going to see developers that want to work with you. We have Model Group, Penrose, both are huge, wildly known for wanting to work with the communities. Not all developers do that. Make it hard for them to not work with you, and be a community that when they don't work with you, people take notice, like that developer's not working with Madisonville because they're like the best community to come in and work with. They're smart, they are organized, they work together, they listen to their neighbors. That's what you want to be. So that way it's their shame if they don't come talk to you. Okay, with that, what are some of our big questions we need to hit before we break up into some small groups and come up with some goals? Yes?
Just a follow-up point on the discussion we just had. Is there a community that we could look to as an example that developers does?
Oh, yeah, I mean, probably the biggest one right now is going to be Covington, the IRS site. I think there's 14 different developers. That's actually one of the coolest things I've seen take place. I'm sad I was not a part of it. They have like, they're forcing developers to work together so none have a monopoly. Like, it's not good for a developer to have multiple sites together in one community. Monopolies aren't good, right? It kind of takes away the ability to have some kind of like competition in pricing, and it also kind of allows them to run haywire. This is forcing developers to kind of work together and also kind of maintain this like vision without running all wonky with it. Mr. Ty?
Okay, there's a community development act, CRA, and that's where they get these tax.
Yes.
I guess my question to you is this, which I didn't think I would do it, whatever. I think the acronym gives a tip. Some of you actually have tips when you say, I've heard, they don't like tips at all. Every local service you get gets affected. They don't pay anything in there. These are services we rely on, mental health, MRDD, they don't pay any of them. Tip goes into a fund. Tax abatements, is another thing you see. But anyway, I can say is there was two companies that got a tax abatement from Convergence. They got a tax abatement from the city. And the agreement was that they would create so many jobs. They didn't create enough jobs. And they lost their tip. They lost their tax abatement.
Yep.
And
yeah, you have to meet a threshold for tip.
they didn't need Coca-Cola.
Mr. Cole, give me 1 minute.
I'll get off here real quick here. Coca-Cola over here in Madisonville, when they got their tax abatement back in the 80s, I remember like it was yesterday. They promised that they would hire residents from Madisonville, and they never came through with that. And they didn't lose their tax abatement. That's why we got to get teeth in this thing.
Yes.
We got to get some kind of locked in, and we don't have Ackerman to build a parking lot, didn't build it. Didn't write it.
Okay, now, my role with housing, as the housing chair for MCC, I can't talk about a specific developer because we have to be fair, but what I can tell you is we can talk about ways that if you have that you can work on that. Do we want to have a future meeting where we learn about TIFs and different subsidies and how they work?
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. We will do that. Mr. Poole, you had a
City contract all the time. Can't stop them doing anything.
No.
CPA or nothing and that. And so they got the whole code. And they just put money in the tip money. You shaking your head.
because that's not what I'm
You
saying.
asked me to talk, now you shaking your head.
No, I'm responding to what you're saying because that's not what I said.
The thing is, nothing but the rich contractor to get a tip. They get abatement, 15 years abatement. Sacrifice and bought property here. You had the white flight away from Cincinnati. Madisonville, downtown, they to pay the tax. They did that. They took care of Cincinnati, made sure they had money to go into the coffin for the tip. Now, here they come back. They said, we made a mistake. Went up at 275. Gotta get up at 6 o'clock to get down there. We got snow. We on 275 for 2 hours. Now we made a mistake. We gotta run all the people out because we made a mistake. Now you're giving the contractors coming into the neighborhood and taking people home. You got to build them out, all these schemes to try to get poor people out of here, or middle class people out of here. And then this program with your contract. The CBA don't work, they can do whatever they want. You got the idiot cities council down there, let them get away with everything. Like you said, back in the 80s. So we gonna be little shake your head. If you ain't getting nothing, you doing all the work, and you putting money in the tip. These people got homes. They put money up to buy the home, take care of the home, cut the grass, and you can't get a tip. You can't get a 15 year. And you got that mayor down there come up with, if you want, you pay $2,500 on the improvement, then you do $3,500 improvement, and that's $6,000. And probably in this room, emergency, probably no money in the bank to pay a bill. That's $6,000. So that idiot came up with that program. We want the same program that the if you bought a house, you made it down payment, you made the mortgage, taking care of it, you should be able to get a payment.
Okay, Mr. Poole,
No, I didn't cut you off.
Mr. Poole, this is actually my meeting, so I'm gonna say this. Instead of telling me this, write this down so we can get it into paperwork and policy. I want you to have something you can do.
Get me
to
in
help.
front of the clowns that come up with this.
So you just wanna complain, not do anything,
No, it
that's
ain't
what you're
complaining.
doing right now.
It's all true. Tell me
Okay.
what line did
No,
I
I
tell?
just sit there and.
What line did I tell?
Okay. You,
What
you
line did I tell?
said that I said you had no power and you do, and I said repeatedly you
I
have
got
power. Sir, do not put words into my mouth. I can assure you that is
Well,
not what I
I'm
said.
gonna
You
hear
have
from you.
power.
You here for the contract.
Oh, I am not here for the
Yeah,
contract.
yeah.
100%, I can assure you I'm not here for the contractors.
We want the same contract and the contract we get. We already put our money
Can
up.
you do something here and let us get to the point so you can do something about it, sir?
I
Because
will
you
do
have
something
great
about it.
opinions.
That's
Have
not our
thoughtful
opinion,
things to
ma'am.
say, but I
What
want you to
did
do
I say
something.
that as
Okay,
a lie?
please.
Where's the lie?
I'm not asking you about a lie. I'm telling you, please let
I'm
somebody else
telling you.
speak.
Where's the lie?
Sir, for expectations on behavior, we're not gonna waste everybody's time who came out here to do something, so you
Go
can
ahead
either
with your
leave
story.
or be quiet.
Go ahead with
Okay,
your story. I can talk.
your story's outside.
I'm a.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Alicia, I've parked a lot of taxpayer policy because something that's.
Yes. Let's, Mr. Harris, and then we'll answer that, and then we've gotta get together and do this small groups, Ms. Angela, we'll get yours too. Yes,
Just want to go over a few things. One is that, you said affordable housing developments have is to make affordable housing. And most of the time, it's a nonprofit developer creating affordable housing. And most of the time, the nonprofit developer loses money. So it isn't a requirement. I just wanted to clarify that, and that's what I do.
So you don't make money doing anything to upkeep the properties or?
What I interpret as make money is make profit.
So I said nonprofits, I made the comment that even if it's a nonprofit, they still have to have like a revenue stream somewhere coming to support the property maintenance.
But that doesn't come from the.
Okay, not always, sometimes it does.
Almost no.
The subsidies offset that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's what I was saying, that they have to have subsidies because they still have, they can't lose money.
Right.
So if you didn't have subsidies, could you do these projects? I was trying to, and I probably didn't articulate
I
the
mean,
thing.
just to be clear, they don't have
Subsidies.
to make a profit. A profit means someone is making money on a deal in affordable housing. Because there is no greed in affordable housing. There is no middleman, there is nobody living in it that is making money off of the sale.
I'm not talking about profit, I'm just saying there has to be a margin of, you have to have a sub. Dollars on a project,
They easily lose hundreds of thousands.
but millions.
Hundreds of thousands. The port, almost everyone that they did in Evanston, they lost hundreds of thousands.
It's for folks that are trying to understand how this works. So you're saying it's pretty easy to get funding in for an affordable housing development?
Yes, yes it is.
Oh, wow, there's a lot of developers that would disagree.
Well, it depends on where you're calling it development. Nonprofit developers such as working in neighborhoods, which I'm a construction. Decades and decades, and they have the resources to maybe work building neighborhood in Cumminsville. Yes, you can, and it doesn't have to be hard. I'm just making my statement, and you can sit here and argue with me. Just let me get this out, okay? Just let me. Okay, well, I'm just saying it's been back and forth. I just want to get what I have to say out for. That I wanted to say is that, you know, the city doesn't tell you when you can make a neighborhood plan. That's not how it works. In the past couple of years, finding or soliciting plans, but a neighborhood can make a plan anytime they want on their own time and submit it to the city. The last thing I just want to say is when it comes to plans, they're just a plan. So just to give you an example, I was involved with writing the override plan in 2001. And in 2001, in the plan, which is 171 pages, it's an inch thick, we said that should be 60% affordable housing. And when we say affordable, just so you know, everybody knows that affordable, generally speaking, is 60% of AMI. So 60 less or less. So what we said was 20. Which is $20 now. 5% of our line should be 30% of it. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that over the line is currently affordable, that 60% of the houses are affordable to a person making $10 an hour or $20? That I'm making here is just because we have a plan, okay? We took 2 years, the Community Building Institute, and the plan didn't pan out. Okay, just because you make a plan. But certainly over the line did not abide by it. CPC, which was
Yeah, so I can better understand, because in my experience, like, if a neighborhood plan is created that becomes part of, like, it's accepted and adopted by the city, and the fact of zoning. So, like, the zoning and subsidies, the policy was adopted from the plan?
They, I mean, it needed to be rezoned, and they had no problem getting it rezoned.
Did the city council adopt the plan?
And it was adopted by the cities.
Acted the plan into all zoning and policy?
Zoning can be changed with the plan.
Yes,
And
I'm aware.
the developer to change zoning on it.
So generally speaking, the neighborhood plan, if it's adopted and put in, at least in the city and put it into policy, that affects all the different things, it's not a successful rate, is it 100% effective? No. But it comes, I mean, if that's the case, then why are we doing anything anywhere?
Well, that's a good question.
Okay, and so what's your solution?
Well, I mean, I'm an actor. And I am involved with things like this, I ramp it up to the point of civil disobedience. I mean, there are buildings in over the line that have been saved by civil disobedience.
Yes.
And it's how high you want to go with it, but then you have to involve things like that. I mean, your strategy depends on your target or what you are fighting.
MCC can't do that though. Like the community council, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but civil disobedience, this community's got several very active groups of folks that show up and they're
And they
very
got
vocal.
stomped on by city hall.
Okay. And once again,
Told they were.
our role with MCC is what, Carrie?
Be the voice of the community.
So are we allowed to show up and protest and like kind of like lead?
I mean, my outlook is that, the president doesn't set policy for the community council.
Mhm.
It's the general body, our monthly meeting.
Yes,
And so, like, I view the general body as the legislative body, that is what sets the policy.
yes,
So ultimately, like, our goal here in general is that we would have a durable housing committee, because other community councils, they have maybe like a zoning committee, and the developer would go there first, that's their policy. But for us to have that, and then that committee then presents a recommendation on how to handle that, how to respond to that project, right? And so at the end of the day, like, we can't have that if we don't have a volunteer base to build off of and to start with. And so ultimately, like, if that's what the community wants, then I'll go and do it. I view myself more as like the arrow, and I need the community to point me in the right direction.
Just gives the community the tool.
but this is like basically.
West End voted overwhelmingly against the stadium, 84 to like 5.
And I can understand.
I'm just saying, but
Well, I'm not saying I disagree with you.
and if they do or can get listened.
Well, and I'm not at all, and I've been on your side of things, Mr. Gary. It's just from this perspective. Now, what they need to do is if folks want to get together and show up and use their voice in that manner, you can be a tool for them. But then in this respect, we're a tool that's trying to give them voice by policy and kind of like through the means that we have available to us. And we also represent diverse groups here. We have folks that have differing opinions on stuff, which means we would probably never get a resounding vote to go out and civil disobedience. I don't see that happening. We also have insurance through the city, so I think that would probably inhibit us a little bit. All right, Angela, you had a question, and then if any of you have time to sit down in like small groups and just come up with a couple goals or action steps, that would be awesome. Okay.
Oh, well, it was a question. I just feel like our community council is not strong.
Mhm.
I see a lot of weakness in our community. We don't have people around there. They're from that council. And that's why I see we gonna have to come together, not one or two, and go down and get in their face and show them what they want. Because at the end of the day, you see those.
Right.
You know, we gotta deal with this. We gotta
Yes.
pay tax. We wanna enjoy our community. We just don't want them to come in here and just put what they wanna put in our community. They should come to the table. Where they at?
Do you want us to get a community organizer that like does this professionally to come out and talk to this group? So you can learn methods for that, because Mr. Gary's talked about this, and now you have, that's really not our goal, but it doesn't mean we can't bring somebody in to teach you all how to do it at a grassroots level. Is that something that's beneficial? Raise your hand if you think it's beneficial, and we'll add it to the list.
What's it gonna take to get somebody from the city and Ackerman to come together and have a meeting here at our community? What's it gonna take? You have to go to a school to learn this, to get them here? What's it gonna take to get them here?
Okay, I think the question is it too late to go back to Ackerman on what's happened? Are we still rehashing stuff that we can no longer address? We need to know that. I mean, the only way to change something with Ackerman is to figure out if we have something there that we can still do something about. We may be on that. We don't know. We need to look into that to see, because if we continue to talk about Ackerman and there's nothing there for us to address, then we're spinning our wheels, and we need to look at what's coming new.
Right, right.
I will say that you all have missed developments.
And I don't know.
Miss Tony's right. You all have missed several developments that were coming up, and people were so angry about the Madison and Wetzel development. You didn't see that other developments were popping up. And that's kind of why this approach and 100% grassroots activism, show up, be loud, like 100%. But from this standpoint, we can help you with policy and with the kind of terminology and what your expectations are that you can take with you to those events.
It's like, real quick, I'm not talking.
And then at least needs a chance, and then we need to break up into small groups.
You have to tell property down there.
Yes.
That's what we sold to somebody. If we have, says the community wants it to be, condominiums or houses or whatever. And then if they come and they want to change the zoning, the community has a fighting chance to change, to fight that, not let it change. Like that development down we did vote for,
Yes.
that was commercial. Today's meeting, we didn't have a master plan, and I know as an elected official, I was elected official in Columbia Township. And they put the forest dealership up there. They had a master plan, but the master plan called for that 4 houses they tore down to be transitional zoning. Meaning they can go either way with it. And that's why we lost the zone change downtown. They went from residential to commercial, they put the parking lot in.
And if you have
So
a
these
site,
these lots, these top politicians. This is a master plan. But they go against that master plan, when they go against the community, you gotta fight the chance.
yes, it's
That
definitely like.
was this.
Mr. Ty, in that vein, and also if it's in a master plan and there's a site that pops up, there's also the potential that you can take that court to obtain the property if it comes up. Because if it's not a part of a plan, there's no reason to necessarily do that, but if it's in a plan, there is.
You know, like
I
this
never
was
thought
too.
back to that.
Yes,
I think the first plan that would turn is in that animals that stay in that home.
Yes.
Should be allowed to stay there as long as they want to.
Yeah, well, what-
It's up to them.
The free
Yes.
market does take over, but there's also other people. Zoning is to protect the community
Correct.
from reach into residential, like that area over there, but go down a Cambridge Avenue, you'll see, they're into a residential area.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm talking specifically with that
Yes.
person's home. That person's home has come up a lot in conversation. That's someone's home. To
Yes.
Mr. Poole's point, that family wants to stay there. They have every right to do
Yes.
what they want to do with their property and not sell it and pass it down to their family
Yeah.
and to the next generation. Part of the community's responsibility as a community is to make sure that they have, just like you would have, they have all the tools in.
yes.
The community has to protect.
Mr. Ty, can we get Elisa a chance, please? Thank you.
So how do you find out early on enough to make a difference about development? Because I feel like it's hard to. Well, agendas or about the meetings, by the time the city notifies you, they have such a quick turnaround time and they give you limited information, then you have to provide written feedback. And then you have like another week to, attend the meeting and it's often during business hours.
Okay, and that's something, so community council and Carrie, Kate, and all of other people that need to speak to this. Your community council is trying to find more streamlined and effective ways to communicate what's happening between an analog mailed newsletter to potentially having like newsletter pickup spots. There was talk of like, I don't, they are better to address that. And I think is there a communications committee or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe, I don't want to address that, but I think the problem is that you all need to have communications coming to you as quickly as possible, is that what you're saying? Okay, that is, I think, integral to the success of any housing issues that we face, but also with any kind of like, any activity that the community council is participating in. I think that they're trying to address it, but if you have ideas for that, I know that they would want to hear that, so please bring that to them. Because you always have great ideas, so thank you for saying something, because, and that's something, when you have ideas, bring them to the table. If it's not a housing idea, we'll just tell you who to contact.
And to her point, like that is a really big problem because the legal requirement for notification on projects is very narrow at the city. So, because you got a flyer in the mail because you're within the radius, and it's like 500 feet or something, and it's only for zone change, lot splits, and what's that? And a variance, and that's like it. And like she's saying, she's right. The meeting is the bureaucratic meeting is during the work day. You can send in a letter writing an opposition, but if you have to work, you're not gonna be able to make it. And that's basically it. Like, and that's from the city's perspective. Like, and that is a huge problem because you'll get that where people who are right outside of that radius who weren't notified, they'll be blindsided by it. They'll feel blindsided by it.
Speaking to that and what Elise said, and what Mr. Poole said about not like needing to have more information, what Mr. Gary said about showing up, what if this group, because it does have to do with housing, it could directly kind of pertain to development, we work on a system that's like part of like a goal this year is to create a system for communicating to the greater community when there's developments and what you can do, like a old school phone tree system. I don't know. I don't have the ideas. I'm hoping you guys do, but we can maybe work on that together. Is that something you all would want to do, to find a communication system to get people together for development? It's not NCC facilitating it. It's you all, us providing the space for you to learn about the development, and then you choose to do that. Mr. Gary?
Well, and then also maybe creating or deciding what kind of development and creating that development. So just say the committee decided that they wanted to have affordable housing and then go about creating it. It's possible.
That's one of the goals that I think it's possible to list. I think that's gonna be a process that we're gonna have to move through and learn about, but there's no reason why we can't be talking about that. And this community council has for a while.
But do you think it's the number of voices or number of unique voices? Because a lot of campaigns will give you the form letter and say, this is who you have to send it to, just, add your name in the bottom and forward it on. Versus, do you think that would have any, is that going to be impactful, having the same people send the same thing? That's very easy versus like getting somebody to come up with their own email.
I think, yeah, you definitely want to take the time to have a unique or a customized or unique or message. But I mean, you can see sometimes at City Hall where 50 people show up and they're all basically saying the same thing, whether it is rehearsed or whether it is the same speech, but like you can see that impact on them currently. Politics change, and it depends on the issue, but like that did happen last year with a zoning policy change that the city was going to do. I would say around 50 people from all over the city showed up, and many of them knew each other, and they were fairly organized, right? Because they all communicated internally, right? And that policy did not pass. So it can be successful, yes.
And you can take a letter and create a letter and then go up and like, as the old school block happens, go up and down your street and say, hey, this is what we're working on. What are your thoughts? Can we get your buy-in? You do that on your street and you do that on your street. Miss Tony, Kathy do it on their respective streets, Angela's on her street. Now all of a sudden you've got voices that are either supporting or opposing something, and you're getting different pockets of the neighborhood. So it's not just this one street over here that's all opposed to it. It's as a community collectively, we're saying, hey, no, stop, don't. And it doesn't always work. I mean, I'll use the example of because Madison West has always been a hot button issue. In the middle of the pandemic, people actually went around and got signatures from all over the neighborhood, and there was a vote taken at council, and there still was not a pause on the project. Sometimes that's just the nature, to Brian's point in OTR. Sometimes that's the nature of the beast, but a lot of times just doing the work and learning the system and learning how you can affect change in policy. What worked at the Jameson doesn't necessarily, it's not a cookie cutter thing. It doesn't necessarily work over here. But if you get, Lisha will kill me for this, you train the developers to understand that, hey, you're gonna have a series of conversations. You're gonna have to come to the table. There are a lot of things, and you know, from working with the Jameson project, there were things that they actually redesigned with that project because that's what the stakeholder group demanded from the project. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
And I 100% say to train the developers. I don't know why you thought I'd be upset about that. They should know what you're expecting as a community. All right, you need to bring up in small groups. Mr. Poole?
Sure.
One last.
To show what the power is, this council gets a little over $900 to the council from the city. This would be 10. But this council, Ackerman, the city gave him 2 lots. Artsville and the lot across the street, gave him this mall up here free of charge. And we voted not to let him get that. They gave him $500,000 or $600,000 out of the tip line to develop it. And we voted no. A couple weeks later, we went back. So that's showing that you don't have no power. If you vote one time and you say no, then they go right down the line and say yes, and the contract, this developer get what he wants. Out of our money that he already rich, he gonna pass wealth on to his kid and their kids and that. But probably in this room, your wealth ain't going nowhere but nowhere. And then we okay to say no CPR, no CBA, and they doing what they want to do. So that proves if we say no, they're gonna do it anyhow. West End said no to the stadium, FC. They went around there, dined 3 or 4 guys and women in the city hall, gave them a sandwich and a pop.
Mr. Poole, the problem is the administration with that. That's not your actions. You all took actions. I think at that point you need to look at your administration, the people that are in office.
You got criminals up in the spot. That's what you got.
So there was action that was taken because the Sierra lot, people remember,
Yes.
there was a community engagement with the Sierra lot, which is adjacent catty corner, whatever you want to call it, to where Artsville currently sits. There was a lot of community engagement and discussion about that. The initial plan was to do a parking lot behind Artsville, and on the Sierra lot, the people that showed up to that community engagement overwhelmingly said affordable housing. There's no parking lot there. There's also no affordable housing. The developer said they couldn't afford to do affordable housing at what was being requested. The lot is currently still sitting empty. So
who got control of the 2 lots?
that's the city property. The city owns that property, not Ackerman, not any developer. That is currently city property.
Right.
And so it
So
works.
so the downside is it's sitting empty. But the upside is that the city said, we're hearing overwhelmingly affordable housing. Let's put a pause.
And sometimes the problem is not that you're not saying the right things or taking the right steps. If nobody's listening to you at City Hall, then your next step is you need to deal with City Hall.
Hey, listen, if you're a criminal, you're gonna continue to rob or lie. That's what they do. Just what they usually do.
So, but all I'm trying to say is, it's sometimes you have to look at where the problem is, because you're not the problem in that situation. You all are doing what you're supposed to. The people are supposed to be listening to you aren't. So then you need to address that issue. The key is this committee here is to get you the information you need to make sound decisions for housing and development in this community, and then facilitate opportunities for you all to develop goals and plans and kind of the steps you need to get there. And if you need some help along the way, we can provide those resources. So the last few minutes, if you have time, because I know we're running a little late, if you can work with some neighbors, maybe even go find somebody you don't know and just write down a couple goals you think we should have. Please keep them to this committee. If you have goals for another committee, write it on a different piece of paper. You can go take it up to our illustrious president right up there. Yes, Ann?
Just, I couldn't hear, because there was background, but what is community council's stance on, what Brian suggested, civil disobedience?
We don't have one. I mean,
Basically,
you're-
I mean, we're insured by the city, so.
So the community councils could do civil disobedience.
I mean, we have to, we don't have a policy for it, so we need to create a policy.
When you organize.
Okay, this is good. I answered a question. She said, well, what would you do? And I said, I am not tied by anyone. I am a disciple of Reverend Morris, who was a civil disobedient, who did say buildings in over the Rhine and the West. End.
Correct.
But what this committee can do is create a like strategy or plan or system for communicating with others. And you all could use what you take here from information and the system you create to grassroots plan your own events. Not necessarily an NCC event, but you have gotten the information you need to make an educated, thoughtful stance in your active civil disobedience.
And whatever that doesn't mean you have to get. Okay.
You're not changing yourself to trees
There's
every week,
another
right?
thing to be creative about, to try to draw attention to a need, whatever that need may be, and the need may be, affordable housing or something else. I think there's a great need for affordable housing.
Yes.
And I also think that, things like sleep outs or sleep ins, I mean, there's a million things you're not risking getting a present for, but you're drawing attention to an injustice.
I just think we have to work within the confines of, I'm not, and please understand, I'm talking to you as the MCC housing chair. If you ask me this as Alicia, not in this room and not with MCC attached to me, I'm gonna tell you all kinds of wild things I've done as far as activism. I just can't personally say that we're gonna do it right here. And feel free to have those conversations.
How many's on the committee? The housing committee. How many's on the housing?
The housing committee is, this is a part of it now, if you wanna be.
How many's on it now?
However many we want, like, the housing committee, nobody signed up last year when we did the open call. Not one person responded, so we just kept meeting with developers. We did this because we've been listening to what you're saying. We've heard you say you want to have tools to empower yourself because things haven't been working. So I do listen to you, Mr. Poole, every single meeting, and I do think you're thoughtful and I think you're smart, and I want you to have tools. Angela, I think you're great, and I love the power and the enthusiasm you have in this community. I want you to have tools. Take advantage of the resources I have, so you can use those as tools. So the key is, if you want to be a part of this committee moving forward, we listen to you, we want to give you a place to plan. Tonight was just about giving you some information on the forefront, so none of that stuff gets in the way anymore. Because a lot of times having incorrect information has probably hindered us more than anything with progress when it comes to development and your concerns and thoughts. Let's get you on a level playing field and so you can work together. And if you guys want to just take 5 minutes and talk to each other, and Angela, I'm gonna walk on and just answer your question. I'm gonna take any questions that we did not answer. I will answer them and send them out in an email. As long as you put your email address on that piece of paper, the sign-in sheet,
Okay.
I will send you out an email and I will send you the PowerPoint. What are you pointing at, Kate?
Oh, for the sheet with background. I think I tracked down everybody.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, if you, Ann, yes.
Go ahead and answer it. I'll go in for you. She was first.
Oh, well, yeah, my question is, do we as a community, do we have to be, I'm not going to start that up, I'm just, just pay attention to what happened in Lincoln Heights. Do we also have a leadership that we have to represent us?
I think,
Can we be sold sometimes by our leadership?
what?
Can we be sold, our community sold out?
Oh, you can totally have leadership.
Like, keeping-
Totally, that can happen. The NCC, like how the community councils are set up, they are the official adopted, accepted
Recognizable.
organization that's for the city of Cincinnati City Council. As far as who's on the administration, you can vote everybody out if you don't like it, like if you feel that it's time to organize and get rid of folks. I suggest you be thoughtful with it. Don't do it every time, or nobody's gonna run, because they don't wanna like get into a situation where they're gonna feel shamed. And beaten into submission. And I've seen that happen in communities too. That's actually kind of nasty. Sometimes in ward systems, you'll see it happen. But yeah, you can try, and there are times, not everybody. And the people that tell you like sickeningly sweet over and over again, oh, you need to watch out for it.
And we have the Madisonville Community Council has an election in November.
Yes.
So that's just an FYI related to what you were talking about. And so if you want to run for office, or if you know someone, like that's.
We actually want more people joining in, so please get involved.
We only
get
had
involved.
of the five positions, the last election, only one was a competitive election.
The president of the West. That's the day without the authorization of the-
That is a messed up situation.
I'm definitely not gonna do anything like that.
You know what I'm saying? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
And the president of our council make decision with the developers in the city without us being involved.
They can, but they shouldn't. Our policy right now doesn't allow
Oh,
for
you just
that.
said they can, but they should.
They, depending on the policies, now, our policies, there have been times where community councils voted differently than I think all of us recommended, so it's,
But that's where it's important to show up to the election
yes.
for the organization to make sure that it represents the community, and you've got people who are in those positions that aren't gonna do things like what you're talking
I'm
about.
gonna apologize. Did I explain that you all know the process for developments and having letters of support or any kind of like support or actions on our part? You all know that, or do I need to?
Or, like ours.
Yeah, we have an internal policy,
You want me to really muddy the water?
huh?
You want me to really muddy the water?
Yeah.
Because it's in writing. I've actually legally signed 3 different documents without a vote in front of council because of the design review committee.
Yeah, that's not, that design. review
And it was
committee
literally deciding on. That's the top of the building was one.
Yeah. The color brick,
The color of
we
brick.
picked that.
There's one other thing that had to do. with
Something to
the-
windows. That's windows or something.
Windows. Oh, it was the setbacks from the street.
Yeah.
The, how the little walkouts look. Not the bump out. how the
No.
walkouts- it's not just specifically with the maximum development. The walkouts across from, on Wetzel. On
The
that.
design review committee, how it was set up, kind of allowed bypassing. So that's important to know when you're learning about development. That's a tool, Mr. Poole, that you want to, like that right there, knowing to whether or not you want that to be allowable is important. And saying you don't want it allowable if you don't is important. But if you don't know that that exists and that that's how that is, how a design review committee is created and that they can have this power or not, you can't. So that's what we're going to be here for. And every time you bring up something like this, you know something else to address. The process for us specifically, the developer contacts us. They first have to contact Carrie, the president, or be the housing chair. They never just contact Carrie. Carrie and I occasionally will meet with them just to go ask questions about how they come meet, what we expect. Then they come meet with the board where they actually bring what they want to show us, right? They kind of show up and we can kind of begin vetting right there and say, hey, these apartments are like $2,000. These, the community's not gonna dig it. Like, don't do it. Or I'm trying to get some of the other issues we can tell them up front. Like, there's no parking, you gotta have some parking. Community's gonna get upset about this. We've had issues. We're only basing it off what you tell us. We do not put in our own thoughts. If it was me, this would be the Regal district in France, and we'd have Moulin Rouge out here, cabarets all over the place. That's not what we talk about though when I'm here in Madisonville, because that's not what you all want. So they come meet us at the board gives them feedback. There have been times that we have told people they can't come before community council. They have to like go back to the drawing board, correct? Like at least once or twice. So if they go back to the drawing board, they have to come back to the board before they come to community council. If not, they go to the community council. The community council has also asked to come back. Am I correct? So that's where you start having a voice. And I will say this. I know sometimes you can feel like you have no say-so and no power, but all these times we've made them come back, have they not come back and kind of met at least some of the asks that we've had? Is that correct in saying that? So you all have had an impact. Stanford,
So
Angela,
why
you
should
all
the
have.
board just meet with the president of our community council or even the board when I come to us?
They come,
You
It's
know,
a-
me trying to speak for us. We need.
That's the
we
point of
need
that. That's the
to
point of
speak for
this.
all of us.
That's the point of this. The housing, that's how you should have is that I get too many emails.
yes.
I'm saying like everybody just automatically emails me and if there's no, we're a committee driven organization. So if we don't have full committees of volunteers to handle those specific issues, then things are gonna go between the cracks. So if we have a full housing committee of volunteers, that becomes step one, is the housing committee would talk, then our policy becomes, you developer, you want this letter of support, that way all your paperwork is easier. That way, because that way, when you'll see it all the time too, when you have the community organizations all oppose a project, it'll get cycled back and redone. That recently happened in Cuff by UC. And so, well, to do that, you have to have a housing committee of volunteers who are willing to step up and to split those hairs and have those critiques. That way, they actually are going to have something specific criticism for them to address.
We have a policy where nobody on the board meets one-on-one with the developer. There's always got to be two people there. So we have a policy written down.
I mean, we don't, but I mean,
don't think
I mean, for me, like I pretty much never send an external email without somebody in copy, whether it's the vice
Emails
president.
are great emails. We have a one-on-one discussion. Is there a policy that we don't meet unless there's two people, at least two people meeting with the developer?
I mean, no, it's not a formal policy for that,
There's
but
not a policy, but we could create that.
right.
Or make them come here. I just feel like.
Well, that's before
we
this year
shouldn't
didn't
have just one
exist.
person to speak for all of us. We shouldn't.
Well, and
Because we
no
don't know
one person
the
is.
negotiation that they're going with the developer that we don't know about.
Now, it's not negotiation. When they go before the board, Angela, it is vetting them
But they
at the
speak
base
for us.
level. No, it's all the things you've asked for, that we're saying up front, like if you don't have parking and you're gonna overwhelm the street with parking, you all have resoundingly said time after time after time after time, we want parking. So we let them know you have to have parking. Like, these are just
Or,
things that you all have said. We don't do negotiations. We are doing baseline vetting, saying you can't even bring this to the table until you meet X, Y, and Z. Then you all get to negotiate. As far as this committee, it didn't exist before. We had to go through what we went through tonight because a lot of folks had some misconceptions and some false information. Mr. Gary had to educate me a little bit on something. I worked in the field now for 17 years. I'm crazy. But we have to get on the same board to see if this committee can be that tool. Carrie would probably love it if you had a little less work to do. But that means we need you to show up and we need you to participate and we need to like move through. I know it's easy to get upset and say what we're angry about. I want you to say what you're angry about, but I want you to do something with it. Let's actually like get some stuff done because we're not all gonna be here. At some point, we're gonna be gone. Not everybody's always active in these roles. Like, use me while you have me. I'm here to help you. Kate's here to help you. Carrie's here to help you. We got other folks. Anne's here to help you. She's kind of sitting there as part of the committee, but she's also here to help. And Anne volunteers a lot with many different community organizations. We've got great folks in this room. We got Miss Tony here from Community Council. Sorry, I'm like looking at Miss Tony like, we've got our youth council here. We want our youth council to be prominent. I sent her an article the other day that said that like youth councils basically can alter the way that an entire community or city works. Like, we need to start taking everything we're saying and putting it into action, and I want to help you do that while I'm here.
I just working on the policy piece, so that's on.
All of these questions I will address and send out an email, okay? And if you need to further discuss it, let me know. I am dealing with federal audits through tomorrow, and I have to clean up over the inside stuff. After that, I will have more time to kind of like talk more one-on-one, and I apologize, I haven't. It was just, I actually was supposed to be already gone, and they kept extending my contract. And I couldn't say no. When people say, will you please stay, I have a problem with saying no.
So if you're trying to form a committee, there's somewhere we can get together, get the city and acronym here for the community. I think this is what people want to.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, Angela, at this point, unless Ackerman has a new ask, I don't know what you can do. They have, the project is done, they have it. Now, as far as the property, they do not own outright the strip mall, right? Isn't a lease.
Right.
So you could probably like, that could be a discussion point. But the properties that they own and developed, that's done.
They could be approached anytime from us, anytime.
Well, anytime for an ask, but as far as, Brian, as far as like being really, and they have not been responsive to ask about those.
Reasonable people, right? Gotta assume they're reasonable people, right? And if you needed something, they have the community's best interest.
Well, maybe we can go over with you like what the community has done for asks, and you can come up with a solution for the stuff that like rule out what hasn't worked.
They said no.
I don't know how many times or whatever, but I think there's been times where they haven't wanted to do stuff that the community's asked. I don't know, like I'm kind of looking at you all because you were in these roles before me.
There was stuff for me.
Okay, there was stuff for you. So people claim, and I don't know, because I wasn't on this side of things, but people have claimed, Mr. Gary, that there were multiple times they said no. So if that's the case, you seem like you probably have a lot of solutions. So maybe you can bring those back to us and we can like learn from that. That would be good for this group.
Yeah, I think like your point being is that all the contracts are signed, so like that,
Yes.
there's no more leverage
Yes,
left
the-
because they're under contract.
Yeah, you can, I mean, you can go ask, you can ask me to chop off all my hair and call me Fred tomorrow. It doesn't mean I'm gonna say, okay. But if leverage was something like, hey, Alicia, if you cut off your hair, I'm gonna give you $1 million, you best believe I'm gonna cut off my hair. Yeah, they can.
Did we ever find out whether his contract is complete?
No, I don't, the last time I checked, we don't have, we still don't know the TIF expenses and we don't know about the contracts being complete. If I am factually incorrect, that was my last knowledge on it. Kate, Carrie, or anybody else, if you have knowledge.
I've not pulled FOIA for TIF receipts in a year, so.
Did you get your FOIA answered? Did you get any of your open records requests answered?
All but one.
Okay,
So 4.
okay.
But I've not pulled, the last receipts I got were for phase 1, and I've not gotten anything since, but I also haven't asked in a year.
Were the phase 1s complete? No, okay. So like a year ago, the phase 1s weren't complete. So I mean, the projects, like people are leasing the spaces, now their commercial spaces are vacant, so maybe there's like an issue there that you guys can ask about. I mean, you probably need to know what the issue is because they're vacant.
I talked to Iran today, this evening, you know, they're trying to shut him down. And if the city decides to go and make a deal with him, so they are gonna renew his lease. But yesterday, in his investigation, Ackerman don't even own those apartments, he said he's just running them for the city. So all this development, the city, he said the city owns. Ackerman's just been appointed to run everything.
On the property.
How much they own 3 of the corners, not the strip mall, not Praise Temple, not the Fifth Third Bad Toms. It's
They
like
have,
a-
they have options on a couple properties.
Yeah,
Didn't he receive-
there's a
didn't he
lease, there's a
receive
weird
taxpayer
lease
money?
option thing with that,
Mhm.
but they own.
Did he receive
But that's
taxpayer
separate.
Yeah, they
money?
receive TIF dollars, like actual
So-
subsidy.
so
that's
sidewalk
inside.
walk. $6, should the city have some type of investment in that, other than just Ackerman? Is that
The city's investment is the return on taxes elsewhere that are generated by improved, the tax improvement district. I'm telling you what the methodology is. I'm not saying that it works. We have a lot of TIF. The idea of a TIF district is to incentivize development. Cincinnati incentivized development and then they just kept on incentivizing unnecessarily for many years.
So again, your tip dollars are for public infrastructure, so your overhead, so all the new poles, all the new stoplights, the sidewalks, all the underwater, underground.
Thank you for coming.
water, sewage, anything that's public infrastructure is what those tip dollars are paid for with those sources.
But it's specifically for those developments, just like the state. investment,
Right.
like, infrastructure, but it's money that the state would have had to pay for,
Right.
had the city.
And it's
That's
Under-
I mean, it's like,
That's money they took from.
innovation says our tax.
I can't do it.
So, okay, I have to say thank you. I know this was a lot tonight, but I feel like we're all on equal footing. Like I said, you cannot possibly ask a stupid question. I get confused and I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I think all of you that I've spoke to leading up to this have had great input. Everybody's bringing value to the table, everybody needs to be heard. I want this to be a space that you can use, so if you want to come back, I encourage you to stay a member and be active. The meetings moving forward are gonna be more engagement based. I'm gonna kind of like have things set up to help facilitate what you want to do and can take a step back and then help just process the information at the end or send it back out to you. But we needed to get this initial thing out of the way because there's been just a lot of misinformation and sort of.
How many developments are down the road this year, you know?
Know of is the one we talked about the other night.
So, 1, 2, 3, it's like I'm forgetting one. I mean, 4, I guess, total that are in some that, yeah, we know of.
Yeah.
So you got, so the one that's already that is gonna start breaking ground really, really soon and is at Planning Commission on Friday is at Madison and Anderson Place. That's 7 townhomes.
They're already started.
Yeah, and then we've got the Ilsco site, so the Manhattan Harbor,
Yeah,
Manhattan Development Group.
yeah, that's Madison Road by the train trestle all the way at the end before you get into Oakley. That is the next furthest along. Then you have probably the next one after that in the process would probably be Dave Johnson at Bramble and Wetzel, and building townhome style apartments there. And then probably the Reds thinking about building more apartments. Haven't gotten an update from them how far along they are in the design process. And then you've got MedPace is increasing. That was one I was forgetting.
And
That's
Model Laundry. I've heard
oh, right.
pretty like, not anything detailed, but I've had several folks call me from different places kind of asking me about it.
Right.
End of the day was the $700,000
Which ones?
at the end of Rose Street. He came to
Oh, for me, my client was his name, he's the one when you go across.
Right, Erie and Rowe.
Up here. Yeah, you got, I think the 3, and they were like.
Is that actually, so is that new? Is that,
Oh,
Yeah.
Bill Carroll, yeah. Oh, okay.
oh, yeah, oh, man, yeah.
Oh, what happened to Bill Carroll?
Butterfield Place.
Well, it's at the top of Butterfield.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, yeah, forgot about that one because that, he got his approvals like a while ago, yeah.
Yeah, that was like a year.
Yeah, that was a while, yeah.
With
That
all the
was,
traffic is, I mean, with all the development coming in, Madison, our traffic is escalating.
Yes.
Ain't nobody looking at that?
So.
yeah, we are.
Y'all wanna get rid of our side street, but they're not looking at how, like, Settle Street. I know some people want Settle Street shut down. And y'all already voted on that. We gonna need that street because to be able to circumvent and navigate around our community, we need those side streets. Because, so we don't have to worry about going on perimeter of Madisonville when all this stuff is built. It's crazy.
One, we have a transportation committee that's been working, Gary's got some cool stuff that I'm sure he'll be announcing at community council updates as we move along. Transportation is being looked at. So to understand transportation, we have to understand the developments that are coming in. The changes that are gonna be made to our built environment that's gonna affect the transportation. That's where this committee can come in on that too. So you're not, you wanna do transportation committee too, you can. Here, we'll find out about what's happening that will link to impacting transportation. And then that committee will take over on finding ways to fix it. So once again, this is an important group. So thank you for coming tonight. Please come back. How often do we want to meet? And how often do we want to meet? And then I'll talk to Kathy's question. Do we want to meet every other month, every month? Like, what do we want to do? Do we want to do some Zoom meetings, all in person? Monthly?
In person.
In person? I'm just trying to, if you know people who can't get out, I just, the more inclusive we can be. Thoughts, monthly, in person?
Monthly, you can, other people still join.
Oh,
Always.
you keep coming.
No, I didn't get a chance.
You give me a room of 100 people, I'm gonna be happy. everybody's gonna work.
Can we get a group of people to go downtown, even though I know they probably complain?
No, you need to go downtown.
Show our face now.
That's not complaining. That's being an active, engaged citizen. You're not complaining when you go down to tell them you're not happy about
No, we
something.
need, we need to go down their face. We gotta done.
And that's what,
We're sound like we don't see that.
and Angela, use this group then to create and facilitate a way to get people
I also
together.
don't, do not take a backseat in any community in this city. We're freeing jobs. You look at all the jobs in Madisonville, what's happening out here, it's a real thing out there. We don't need to take
Mr.
back-
Ty, Miss Kathy had a question. We can let her go real quick.
Yeah, I'm-
I just have one question.
Yes.
With all of this development happening, we know the developers aren't finished.
Yeah.
There's more coming. I mean, we are we've had the gentrification, we are now in a cleansing process.
Yes.
Why are we not rushing to put together a CBA that gives us something to do? I understand all the other
Mhm.
planning and all the other doing.
No, CBAs are useful tools in certain instances, for sure.
I think she means like to have one that is always there, so that when new development.
For every
comes up,
development,
we
a
can use
general
it.
CBA that
Yeah,
says,
just
You can
generally.
have
you
temp-
show up.
Okay, you can have template language. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But in like, I'll send out the slides, but on that slide deck, there was the one slide that said, CBA is a negotiation and a contract that's developed out of negotiation.
I've worked with.
So basically, it changes with each developer as part of the process.
Absolutely.
So if you want to have standard template language, what's wrong with doing that?
But I mean,
Yeah, there's like, and then you can alter it per development
because,
or.
I mean, we know that they go to MPERC first. They go to the development corp. We're the second, third person to know. I mean, the city knows, MPERC knows before community council ever knows that you've got a development showing up. And we're months into the process for the time it gets to the community council. I mean, that's just what it is.
So I think that having standard CBA language would help you move along through the process and then you can tweak it. I think another thing, because this is a consistent issue that we're finding out, the residents are finding out too late. Elisa spoke to it.
Exactly.
You spoke to it. Stanford spoke to it. Angela spoke, so this is like a consistent thing. So maybe one of the issues we have and one of the goals we have is to make an ask to city council that there's a new method of disseminating information and a new policy they have before they deal with the developer of them coming to a community and talking before they cause disruption. I don't think that's like, actually, there are plenty of communities that have different policies in place like that.
Well, and I think Peasley did a great job. They have a wonderful template that they put together. They worked a couple of years on for developers.
Yep.
And that's.
I mean,
template
there's
that can
nothing
be
wrong
used
with
all
doing
across the city.
a template. It's just, you say that, and I know you know what that means, but for everybody to understand, if you have template language, you're still gonna have to amend that language once you go talk to the developer.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't mean you show up, and so, yes, but it's gonna change. So you don't just show up with this statement being like, this is what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
You show up and say, hey, this is kind of like our standard start point. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, and there's no reason. Can you use this committee to do that? You guys can totally do that. We cannot do it for you. You have to do that for yourselves, and everybody would have to agree on it.
So when it's done.
That's sort of safe.
You can create policy. It's not bylaws, but it's like standard policy that we have internally.
Why can't community council? Why is it the community council? You're saying we have to do it as a group, not community council.
Oh, no, community council can do it.
We are community council. The
Yeah.
housing committee is community council. So like, this is the working group that creates.
What you
that
can
creates
do, if you're talking about, Ms. Kathy, like doing it outside of here, you can totally do that. Okay, so maybe I'm misunderstanding. What is it that you're?
No, I thought you just said community council can't do that. You can as an organization, but we can.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't articulate that well. So what I was trying to say is, we're not gonna like tell you what to do. You all can use this time and space, but you need to come to a consensus as a committee. It couldn't be like you all over here saying this and then them having different language, because then we have mixed
Oh,
messages,
no.
right? Also, since some folks are over there, snacks, I'm on a diet, so if you, that's not MCC, the drinks are MCC. The snacks are not, please take them, I can't take them. I will eat all of it.
8:30.
Yeah. Huh? CBA, I've got templates at my house I can bring. We've got the action, I've got like the national, like the national organization that does CBAs. I can't remember